come to our game jams. You can connect with other people that can help give you some direction. There are other people that are looking to do the same things that you're looking to do. It's a great place to associate. So that's number one. There are plenty of other resources to help you make a portfolio. But please, please do not make the error that many people do, which is to walk into an interview and say, these are the classes that I took. Because nobody cares about your grades.
They care about the projects that you made, the games that you've worked on. The degree is the stepping stone, right? That's the very baseline that you should have. And people always want to. In every job that I've ever had, it's never been about what I did in school. It was the type of work that I worked on.
It's absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's true whether you're in art, whether you're in programming. You got to go in there and show them this is what I made. These are things that my name has been attached to. So that's tip number one. The earlier you start on that, the better off you are. Tip number two, timing is everything. If you are a game developer, if you are doing your own projects, if you're working on a game jam, no matter what you're doing, people are going to ask you, that thing that I asked you to do, how long is it going to take? And every one of you is going to answer to the best of your abilities. And you're going to be wrong most of the time. It will always take longer than you think. There is actually a series on that of short films on why things take that long. But if you had to talk about the worst part of our industry, it's crunch.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know why crunch takes place? Because I'm no better at figuring out how long something's going to take than you are. It's the same thing that happened to you in school. Is there anyone here who hasn't spent the night before an exam trying to figure out all the things that you were supposed to have learned 3 months ago? You're nodding, you know exactly what I mean, right?
Before these finals,
Yeah.
High school day courses, so you can add a crunch one.
Absolutely. And that happens in the industry. And there are a couple of reasons why it happens. And one of them is that the job will always expand to fill the amount of time that you have, to fill the amount of resources. All right? It will always happen that way. And there are a couple of things. There's an interesting thing called Parkinson's Law and why it's sabotaging your creativity. The thing is that as you come towards the final stages of the project, not even the final stages, as you're in that last loop, the last third of the project, there are going to become moments where you're going to become obsessed with something that is not core to the game, that is more or less trivial. And everyone does it. The fact that I'm telling you that people do it isn't going to stop you next time around from doing so. It's that one thing that really bothers you, and that if you take a look at the amount of time that you spend on it, the amount of bucks that you spent does not equal the bang that you get from it. And that has always been the way our industry is. Survival tip number 4. I'm going to jump in here. So number 1 was build a portfolio. Number 2 is the timing is everything. Number 3 was that the job expands. Number 4 is to be intentional. You'll see the word intentional used a lot. Okay? It's doing things with intent. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I'm going to use some fancy terms. Proscriptive versus prescriptive, all right? Proscriptive is stuff you shouldn't do. Prescriptive is stuff you should do. So I used an example of this. In 2018, Guild Wars Studio fires 2 employees after clash with streamer. So this took place on Twitter before it became X. So what the story was, the way it started out is that they were talking about a fairly innocent topic here was the comment that the streamer responded to, saying, interesting thread to read, however, let me disagree slightly. The next thing that you would see is about 4 to 6 hours of back and forth growing increasingly hostile. First of all, the person that started the thread is a full-fledged game developer. I mean, they were working on Guild Wars, which was a major MMO at the time. What do you care what some rando says, right? Does everybody know the XKCD cartoon? I can't go to sleep, there's someone wrong on the internet? Okay? I mean, what do you care about this? But then it continued to go on, and if the first developer wasn't being stupid enough, a fellow developer, also working for NCSoft, also working on Guild Wars, chimed in also. So you now have two developers that are going back and forth, but it's not just with one person whose comments were inoffensive. I mean, there was nothing that you would say. It was a disagreement about the game, all right? And you have people going back and forth on this. Listen, as I said to you, I've done 27 games. Do you think that I agree with everybody? I mean, I just did Rise of the Triad with New Blood and with Apogee. Do you think we were 100% in line just because we've all had more than 2 decades of experience in the industry? We've all had different ways of doing things. I mean, what's the problem with that, right? But the other part is, at what point in this ongoing conversation on social media would an alarm bell go off and you go, this is stupid, why don't I just stop? Okay, I will tell you, it's not necessarily pride, but I have never, ever been in a Twitter spat. Oh, I've had people say things to me that I found offensive. I've had people tell me that I was wrong about things. But I've never had a spat because I feel that that's why God created the block button. I'm just saying, at a certain point, you know, the forest has been lost for the trees on this. So the other thing is, when you start wanting to go into the game industry, what exactly do you want to do? Because the game industry is a pretty big thing. Do you want to do payroll? Do you want to be HR? Do you want to be IT? I mean, these are all positions that almost every company has. What aspect do you want to do? Are you driven to do art? Is there a particular style of art do you want to do? If you don't make that next pixel art game, are you going to die? Is that what's driving you? Or are you like more interested in being part of the industry? Do you just love games and you want to be part of it? So the question comes up, do you want to be a specialist or do you want to be a generalist? And there are 2 schools of thought on that topic, right? If you're a specialist, you can really laser in, you can learn everything there is about a particular engine, about a particular style. Maybe you're just really into lighting effects. Maybe those are the things that you really want to go in. And you can specialize in that, and you can learn everything about that particular aspect. Let me tell you the downside of that. What happens when the software changes? What happens when the next version of Unreal comes out? And that thing that you were doing is no longer relevant.
Unity start charging for it.
Or you've become an expert on Unity and the company pivots. Where does that leave? So there's advantages to being a generalist, right? Because you're learning a bit about different things. The old joke about the generalist was jack of all trades, master of none. And that's not necessarily the case. We talk today about T specialists. If you picture a T, but then you picture lines coming down from it. So you've got your horizontal and you have your verticals. That maybe you know a whole lot about a couple of different disciplines. Maybe you're pretty much expert and you can talk about all of those things. And that's interesting. I mean, there's advantages to both. Almost everyone that I know that is truly successful in the games industry is multi-talented. All right? Even that aspect of it goes, I mean, throughout up to the managerial phases. You very rarely find senior executives in game companies that have a specialization. You usually find them that they know hopefully a lot about a variety of different things. So that's one area. Well, if you're going to become a generalist, if you're going to learn about a variety of different things, maybe you want to learn something about game development, and maybe you want to learn something about art, but not necessarily be an artist. Maybe what you're really looking for is roles as a producer or as a manager, right? When you go to the producer of a game and you're a specialist in a particular field, you expect to be able to talk to that producer. He may not know the same, he or she may not know the same amount that you do about that specialization, but you can talk about it with them. Maybe they can point out things that you didn't know about that. You can talk about them. So you have the artist talking to the producer. The artist leaves, the sound guy comes in. Now he's talking to the producer, or she's talking to the producer, or they're talking to the producer, so on and so forth. Well, you can see the advantages about being a generalist, right? It certainly gets you up to a higher level of things. That's not to say necessarily higher salary, but there are advantages to being that kind of generalist. Well, one particular type of generalist, one person that goes under that umbrella is business development, which has been my career for 23 years. I have my name attached to literally dozens of games, somehow without writing a line of code or drawing a single pixel. The advantage is that I know the games industry, I understand, I'm able to forecast what things will do. I mean, I'm able to predict the future because I have this broad background of working in a variety of different fields. I will tell you that especially in the early days of establishing a company, the line between biz dev and production often gets blurred. I not only sold the game, I not only negotiated the contract to give us the rights to make the game, and I sold the game at the end, but I monitored the team all the way through. So I could do things like work with the head of production to come up with a milestone schedule, okay? And what kinds of skills do you need in that? Skills are Word. Well, it's not even necessarily Word. I don't mean about the program, but you have to be able to write things. Excel, you have to have some background in numbers. You have to know the tech. You have to understand what basic requirements are. You have to be able to read ahead and figure out when a game should ship. Let me just say, rule of thumb on that. It's a very difficult decision when you should ship a game. Figure out when GTA 6 is coming out and do it on a different date. We refer to issuing a game on the same day, a title like that is standing in front of the bulldozer. Not a good idea. But again, things about understanding the industry, about knowing what trends are. When people ask me like what my day is, the first thing I do is I read the trades. You have to take a look at what the major articles are. You have to take a look at what's going on in the industry. You need to know those things. I'm going to say to you, you need to know those things regardless of what your position is. Otherwise, you're the one calling up and saying, do I need to come into work today, or do I have the rest of my life free? So that's one thing about being biz dev. The other part about being biz dev, and timing is everything. You have to have friends in the industry. You have to have your connections. I was literally connected to you for a moment there. So some great articles. One of the quotes that I had is networking is marketing. Marketing yourself, your uniqueness, what you stand for. And the other one is your network is your net worth. I've been saying this for years, only half kiddingly, that my entire skill set is encompassed in the words, I know a guy. So those are a couple of survival tips that I wanted to share with you. A couple of things on there, again, to be actionable. What could you do from here? Number one, if you're interested in getting into the business and breaking into the business, take a look at the IGDA. We meet monthly. There's no charge. You can attend meetings. and see if it works for you, make some connections there. Second thing is, especially if you do work for the IGDA or if you're involved in school, participate in the game jam. Build up your portfolio. But then again, also think if you're really passionate about working in the games industry and you're not necessarily committed to doing a single type of thing, think about the advantages of being a generalist.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
My name is Grover. Before I get started with the things I want to talk about, I want to build out a little bit about the game jams. The game jams that I've participated in as a programmer and designer have always been lacking on artists and sound engineers. So if you ever join a game jam, you don't feel like you don't have to know how to code. They need everybody of every discipline. So that's something very important to note down before I go into my talk. So a little bit about who I am. I haven't shipped 22 games, I've shipped 6. I'm an indie game developer. I went to California State University, San Bernardino, graduated in 2012 with a degree in computer science. Tried to apply for every game job that I could for like a good 6 or 7 months. Couldn't get any jobs in the game industry. So I said, okay, screw it, I'm making my own studio. Me and 3 of my best friends, we formed a game studio in the back of my dad's old record store. And we turned a college project that I was working on called Solitria into our very first game, which is still in development. Over that time, we've developed other games, Spellbearers, which is a twin-stick shooter. We've developed several mobile games that we've released that have since come and gone. Let's see, what else? Yeah, and then we're also here at LVLUPEXPO. So our booth is in the back, behind the artist alley. So if you actually want to play our games, feel free to stop by after the panel. If you beat our challenges, we'll give you some free swag. So yeah, a little bit about what I wish I knew. Sorry, I had a whole slideshow presentation and it wasn't there. So I'll just read off of these. First one, have a game design philosophy. Everybody that I've ever interviewed for working with me or my team at the studio, we asked about, what is their game design philosophy? What are their goals when they want to go into designing a game? How do you want the player to feel? Do you want it to be accessible? Do you want it to be challenging? Do you want the players to feel good when they're playing your game? Do you want it to be frustrating, right? Do you want to make the next Dark Souls? Casual, are you making a game for the phone? Are you making it hardcore, where you have to do a lot of grinding and a lot of competition? Do you want it to be easy to learn, hard to master? All of these questions, I personally feel all these questions should be answered before you make one step into actually going into coding and designing your game. Next one, use management tools and software. So for the first 5 years of my game studio, we had like post-it notes on the whiteboard. We had no organization whatsoever. Slack didn't exist, Discord didn't exist, and it was a chaotic mess on how to communicate. So it's very important. What I would suggest is to use a communication tool that's preferably not Discord, because if you use Discord, you might get distracted. For our internal studio, we tend to use Slack because it's something that's completely separate and it has no file size limits. The reason why I bring up no file size limits, it's really easy to, 1, share builds of the game, 2, share video progress of the game between our team. Most of our team is remote, so it's really, I feel like it boosts a lot of morale if we share in progress things with the whole team. Yeah, in Discord, unless you're paying for Nitro, it's like, I would just avoid that altogether. Let's see. Next one, I'm going to go a little bit about game design. So when we design achievements for our game, not only do we design our achievements for our games to be for the players, but we design them for us as well. So, there's achievement tracking, right? If you've played a game on PlayStation, you can see the percentage of people who have completed the achievement that you've completed, right? And it's also the same on Steam. And so when we worked on Spellbearers and we designed the achievements for Spellbearers, we also used that, we tied it to, beating important bosses, beating important things, collecting certain items. We track collections of everything that the player can get. So that way when we do a quick look at the Steam analytics for our games, we can see like where are players getting frustrated, where is the drop-off point, where do people stop playing your game. So the achievements are just as much for you as the player as it is for us as developers. So just, yeah, something to keep in mind there. So my next one is, I call it have a Paul on your team. So Paul is my best friend that I formed the studio with, and he is the person that will kick me down. Like if my head goes into the clouds, he tells me the real truth. If something's not working, he'll be the one to tell me. Sometimes when you work in a team, you get a lot of people who say, yes, oh yeah, let's implement this, or yes, let's do this. But I feel like the team has to be honest with you on things, because if the team isn't honest with you, the players will be honest with you, and the players' feedback is usually a lot more honest and way more brutal. And sometimes, you know, I've had, kind of like Larry, your tweets, some people say, oh, your game sucks, or this is lame, but they never really tell you why, or they'll give you a not recommended review on Steam, even though they played like 1,000 hours of it, but they don't tell you why something is bad. So it's always important to get the feedback from your team, you know, be open enough to where they're upfront and honest with you when something is not working, something is broken, and that way you can get it fixed before it gets to the players.
In every organization, there has to be one person that will say, wait a minute, do we need this? Wait, what's the cost of this? In households, in you know, small familial groups, we usually call that person the mom. You're welcome. Just saying. But there has to be somebody in the organization that says, how does this fit into our budget?
Yeah. So yeah, have somebody really important to be able to tell you the truth on things. Yeah. Next one, this one's kind of out of left field, but Steam Deck has been a game changer for our studio. So I don't know if any of you have been to our Whim Indie booth in the Indie Game Lounge, but most of our games there, if they're not running on Nintendo Switch, they're running on the Steam Deck. When we set up our development, when we first started demonstrating our games at LVLUPEXPO, geez, like almost 10 years ago, we were lugging in these large, giant computers, right? And it was taking up most of our space, having to lug these giant monitors and hook everything up. And with with Steam Deck, you get a Steam Deck dock, you can put any game in development. Your game does not have to be released on Steam to be able to get it working on a Steam Deck. You can turn it on developer mode for completely free. You can load in your game and you can start sharing it with people. So I think the Steam Deck is a great investment for being able to show your games off, and it's really easy to hook up. It's really easy to tear down. You don't have to, you don't have to bring laptops. You don't have to bring big computers to shows anymore. Let's see. Next one is the player's royalty. So I wouldn't say that everything that the player does is right? When we get feedback from a player and they might give you a suggested solution like, oh wow, this dungeon's really difficult, I think this should have less monsters in it, then you have to critically analyze why they think that. Not all of their suggestions are going to be gospel, but critically think why they are having difficulties, right? Going back to my achievements example, look where people stop playing, where they get up and like, oh, okay, I think I've seen enough. Why did they get frustrated with the boss? Did they not know how to hit the boss? Take all these things, write these things down and come up with, if a lot of people, if one person's having difficulty with your game, that might be just a one-off. But if there's a trend, of a lot of people having difficulties with the content that you've made, that could be signs of a bigger issue.
So you mean all these years that I've just been responding, get good?
Players love that.
Yeah, GUD, get good.
Yes.
One more thing on to go back to my have a Paul statement. There's been a lot of Kickstarter games that have released that have either made their goal and they never delivered on their promises, or they ran away, they ran off with the money. I personally believe that most of these Kickstarter games, they originally started off with very good intentions, but they did not have somebody to take care of taxes, or they did not have somebody to make sure everything was set aside accordingly, to make sure that nothing was just ballooned completely out of scope. The game Shovel Knight was one of these these issues, right? They had a very successful Kickstarter campaign. They were able to deliver the game, but they were stuck in a lot of the Kickstarter promises that they made. So that it kind of stifled them later on. They couldn't really move on from this game project until they felt like they fulfilled all of their promises. And then there was other games like Project Phoenix, which was a successful Kickstarter campaign about, I don't know, 2013-ish or so. And they raised almost $1 million because they said, oh, hey, so-and-so big name is working on this project. And then they ran off the money. There was lots of scandals, and then people the team was too afraid to make Kickstarter updates, right? But I feel like they didn't have somebody, like I said, very serious to keep them in line, to keep them in check. I think I have one more important point. Backups. So if you make a project, and this doesn't apply to just games, but anything in general, right? Something's gonna fail, no matter what. Before we used Google Drive, before we used Plastic for our version control, we used Google Drive and Dropbox, and somebody would delete things on accident or rollbacks, and things would get lost. It's very, very important to have backups of everything, away from your computer, away from online, away from like anything that you have immediate access to. Something that's like centrally maintained elsewhere, right? Git, I mentioned Plastic, what else? Perforce. Subversion, yeah. Anything where you can have backups, make backups, because it's not a matter of if it'll fail, it's a matter of when it'll fail.
We used to say that there were two kinds of people in the world, the kind that back up data and the kind that will back up data.
But that's it for my kind of rapid fire notes. If you want to keep in touch, my personal social media is Grover Whim, Grover like the Sesame Street character. Our studio is at Whim Indie. And you can always ask me questions. I'll be at our booth until the end of LVLUPEXPO, behind Artist Alley. So thank you very much.
Chase, play us some music.
Got it.
Imagine me being on stage with Bob Dylan.
Well, I'm the new era Bob Dylan. This time. My name is Chase Bethea. I'm a professional video game composer. I've been working in the industry for 13 years. I shipped about 25 games at a time. I'm known for the work of the game of Ground. Most people relate that to Terraria mixed with Minecraft. I never would have put it together, but it has story, so it has feeling and purpose, which I feel most of you would like to have in this time. So that's the game I'm known for. I won an award for Best Soundtrack for that. Also won an award for On the Peril of Parrots. It's a puzzle game where you're trying to convince humanity about being AI, but you are the AI. So any Legend of Zelda, Ocarina, Oracle of Seasons and Ages, and Link's Awakening puzzles, if you like those type of puzzles, that's what that game's for. I won 3 awards for that, Best Soundtrack, and Composer, and all those other things. And so, most people also may know I scored the limited run Garry's Trilogy trailer, and I did the music for Team Fight Tactics, Set 10 remix last year as well. And my thing is mostly very short. So what I realized and what I wish I knew when I got into the industry 13 so years ago is you can figure out what kind of music you're going to do. You can have a harmonica, you can be all cool. You can understand that the Neapolitan chord from Power Rangers is that, and it rocks on and it fills your ears and it makes you feel good, or that the bicycle theme from Pokemon Red is classical music, and you discover that. But you don't have any business skills. And I'm in the business of service, so what happened there? They didn't teach me that in school. So I've got to be scrappy dude and learn how to get business savvy. Because a lot of people are going to most likely to hire me. Rover hired me for some arrangements for some of the games they did. I've worked with Michael Evans and things, he does music as well, and Larry down the line will hopefully see me and be able to do more harmonica pieces on stage. But business is very important. It's a people industry, and so I walked in there, so it's like, it's about who you know, but it's also about understanding how to run the business grower mentioned, like, he started his own, but what are the finances like? What does it take for the budget to be? And the things that you need to keep in mind is, it might be coming out of your own pocket at first if you want to make that game. If you're passionate about it, these things aren't free, and people have value, we're not robots. So to give, you have to get, and you have to find investment in yourself and start businesses in terms of the importance of knowing where that income is going to happen, allocating that budget properly for you to pay your team, for you to pay proper composer for the emotional experience that you want your player to pay for. So you're not going to give it to the player for free, hope not, at least you're not going to have a successful studio for very long. And with that, you have to understand how to manage your time and the purpose of where you're going for in those things too. You can project these sales, you can do these things. And so what I had to learn mostly was, all right, this is a service and an emotional part. I'm bringing something of value, whereas in this is a soundtrack for your lives. You're going to remember Undertale from that soundtrack for the rest of your lives. You're going to remember that Turok soundtrack for the rest of your life. And that's my privilege to bring to the development team, to bring to the end player experience. I'm actually a player first. I started writing music on the Game Boy in 1997 on Game Boy Camera. So that's how far back it is for me, and it's very fun. But I understand what the player is needing and why it's so good and why they touch our hearts in that form. But business is business, and so at the end of the day, you have to understand contracts. Get yourself a couple lawyers. I have a lawyer in every continent except for Antarctica. I'm working on that one.
The one person that's there.
That penguin with the Esquire.
Exactly, Esquire penguin. So it's important because then you can at least bounce around the ideas. One person not available, you may not be able to afford that rate. You have that. Get a business mentor. Go to these colleges if you're in colleges. Ask these questions. Get these other things together. But consciousness is super important. Don't shy away from it. Just have a friend, have a mentor. Things are really cool about that. You can utilize other avenues of these things to your advantage and get familiar with just possibly understanding where the time management allocation is. So if you are going to be a small team, if you're going to have a couple contractors for an artist or a sound, you'll get this underway. You can actually probably experiment with this with game jams. I would at least too. It might sound weird, but having the initial conversation of it will get you an idea of how much work it is, how long it takes, and what else that you need to do. And just be realistic about your time frame. Everything that you want to release in a 3-month time, double that, it's going to be about 6 months. That's important because within business, you're going to be losing money before you make money. It's really going to take about 3 years before you see a profit. That's what I wish I knew. But thank you for coming anyway.
So if you get your dream job in the game industry, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a contract. And if you're like, I mean, this happens every year that people go, what do I do with this? If it's a small job, then hiring a lawyer just doesn't make sense. The lawyer's going to, you're just signing over all your money to the lawyer. So how do you start off by reading a contract? What should you know? And that will inevitably take you back to being a generalist to at least some degree. Thank you.
Before I start really talking, I feel like I need to say an apology to you because he was super punctual. He was here like 20 minutes before, and he was nice enough to wait so my dumbass wasn't walking in here alone like a half hour late. So thank you, Chase.
You're good. You're good. You just made a dramatic entrance, which is what we always expect.
I try to be subtle. I'm not that dramatic. So my name is Michael Schwalbe. I'm a voice actor, a casting director, a performance director for video games, anime, and a whole bunch of other stuff. My spiel is going to be kind of in 2 parts. Some of what I wish I knew when I got into the video game industry, and then some of what common mistakes I see game developers making because I've now been a small part of some 100 different development teams. So I've got a slightly different perspective on that. But I am curious, of the collective group here, how many of you would consider yourself either a game developer or an aspiring game developer? Show of hands. How many of you just desperately also want to be a voice actor? Yeah, you know. But that's actually, there's more than I thought, so that's good to know. So I'll start with the voice acting side of things. What I wish I knew when I was getting into video game voice acting was, well, and just voice acting in general, was kind of flip-flop from what you mentioned, because I actually knew more of the business side of things, and I was then learning more of the acting and the artistry side of things. I came from a sales job, and I was in the music industry at the time as a singer in a metal band and doing some other local pursuits, but music was in a really bad place in 2010, so I decided to figure out something else that I could use my voice for. But without fail, almost every other actor that I would talk to and you know, that would mentor me, I'd learn all these really great tips about acting and artistry. And I would learn, like you mentioned, that none of them really knew much at all about the business side of things. So I knew a little bit about business because I've been working with sales at a record label. And then I decided I need to get really good at that business side of things. So I started taking like marketing classes, learning how to use Excel spreadsheets because you have to track your jobs, your freelance income somehow. And I think that goes to your point, Larry, of being a generalist. You, as creative freelancers, which all of us likely will be, either as an independent game dev or being in a very small studio at some point, the more tools in your toolbox that you can have, the more successful you will be. Because not only will you have to, it's not like you have to do or wear every hat at all the time, but if you know enough to know what the person wearing that hat should be doing, it also helps you keep your team sharp too, because you know how all the puzzle pieces fit together. Voice acting for games, I just kind of used some of the sales stuff that I learned, and one of the three tenets of sales at their most basic are, who is my client, where is my client, how do I get in front of my client? And for me at the time it was, video game developers are who my client is, where are they, conventions, how do I get in front of them? Go there. So I just started going to conventions like GDC and whatnot like 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something, and handing out cards, playing, and more importantly, investing my time and attention in what they were doing. And I think for marketing, most people think networking is this big scary word, or that it's something that they're just really terrible at. And it really isn't that. It's actually incredibly easy. And all you need to really do is forget about yourself. If the more attention that you can pay to what the person you are talking to is doing, the person that they are, and then the needs that they have, the more you can learn about them, the less it matters what you are doing, because then they're going to want to know what you're doing. So when I go to a networking thing, I have a game I play, and the game is, if I talk about myself unprompted, I lose. So I try to lose, or I lose a point, and then I try to keep track of how many points on the positive or the negative I have. And every time I ask a question about them, and I learn something new about them, I get a point. And so it's just a fun way to make it about the other people, and you actually learn things about them. And then if you've done your job well, then they will want to know what you do, or how you could fit into what they're doing. And if they don't ask you, you still come out ahead, because you've learned valuable info about this person and their work that they're doing. And that goes for just mingling around in groups like this, or for hitting the expo floor, or for going to industry events like acting conferences or whatever. At any place that you're wanting to meet people, the more you focus on other people, the better off you will be. And that also is true for follow-ups. Nobody cares about a follow-up email that just has, here's my name again, and here's all the stuff you may have forgotten about me while I was telling you only about me this whole time, and delete. Nobody gives a shit. Oh, am I supposed to swear? Sorry. Anyway, they don't give a shit. And so, but if you write instead an email or follow-up or an outreach that's like, hey, I saw your stuff at this convention, I went to your website, I checked out your trailer, I loved that huge bass drop with the big hero reveal in the middle, like something that shows that you invested the time, you actually paid attention to what they're doing. Immediately, we as creators are like, somebody paid attention.
That's right.
Oh my God, they saw my trailer. Because nobody does that, and it's so easy. Like, it's so easy. Nobody does that. And ultimately, that's how you start making the I know a guy connections. You don't try to. You just care about what they're doing, and then, 2 or 3 times, when you meet them over 2 or 3 years at conventions, by the 3rd time that you haven't proved yourself to be a creepy asshole, they're going to assume they're your friend. And then you just know people, and that's how a career starts. Because honestly, the industry can feel pretty bleak at times, especially right now with the advent of generative AI. I don't think that it's going to kill all of our jobs, because it's really bad at its job, actually, and it's wildly unprofitable. So when you combine something that produces shitty product plus no profit, businesses aren't big fans of that. So I think it's going to be tough for the next few years, but I think ultimately human creativity will still win. And that will be great for all of us when we get there. I'm going to now go to a couple common mistakes that I see game devs making so that you don't make them as you start out. And then we will move on to another general Q&A.
Yeah, we'll open up to
Okay,
questions.
cool.
Yeah.
Did I even say like what I did or
Covered a little bit.
Anyway, so the common mistakes I see game developers making, number one, scope creep. And I don't know if you have talked about this already, but scope creep is lethal. And what's the saying? Good or great is the enemy of like compelling or
Good is the enemy of perfect.
well, that is for sure. I would say perfect is also the enemy of
Perfect is the enemy of good. You're
Yeah, it
right.
kind of goes both ways, actually. You can get lost in the minutia of perfection such that you like miss the point of what you're actually trying to make. But then simultaneously, you can let every good, new, interesting mechanic that comes into your brain ruin a really compelling gameplay loop. I was a part of a game developer, a very small game studio called Magic and Mirrors, and they had a game called ELO. This was like 8 years ago. And this game, to this day, 8 years later, this trailer and the gameplay videos look unbelievably sick. Twin stick, like bullet hell, shoot 'em up, just so cool, and Unreal 4 or 5, and it looks so amazing. Had an Unreal development grant, they were going places, successful Kickstarter launch, it was great. And then they decided to take time out of the like amazingly fun, fast-paced combat to add crafting and to add like platforming elements. And I was like, guys, hold it, please. Like, I know I'm not on the programming side, but like this is not why people are playing your game. They're playing your game because the game is really fun without this stuff. So even though crafting, okay, it's fine, you're not doing resource gathering, you're shooting things in explosions and lights. That's why we're doing it. But no, and so it ended up languishing in early access hell, and they just kept adding more features, and so they never finished the narrative, and then it ended up just dying, and never actually got even the second half of the story out with a lot of work they paid me to do when I was casting and directing all of it. So a lot of the work they paid me to do never even got released because they were so busy adding features that made them exciting. So scope creep kills. Don't do it. You're far better off having one really great mechanic loop and then releasing. And on that note, release. And it sounds silly, but like you are far, far better off having a pretty good released title than you will ever be trying to chase your dream of like a perfect magnum opus title. And I've seen this currently, this exact second too, with a couple different small studios that hired me. One that hired me years ago, and it was a one-person developer who was making a little first-person shooter, film noir thing that was pretty fun, and I did some spec work for him with a profit-sharing intent later on. And he got offered $15,000, this was like 8 years ago, to do a Humble Bundle. And he was like 19. Bro, take the deal. Like that's, and he's like, well, but I mean, that's gonna prevent me from making anything on my own.
See, in business, then you know.
No, dude, no, but he was passionate. I know, everybody would kill for that. It's your first game as like you're a 19-year-old kid, like, take the deal, bro. Then use that money to hire a couple other freelancers and make a better game for your second game. Now you're in, you've got the deal, you've proved that you can deliver. And no, he turned it down because he thought he could still hone some of the mechanics and some of the level design, and it is like 7 years later, and it is still not released, and he is still working on it, and he has still not made a freaking dime on that game. And to us, it seems really easy, like, oh, well, I wouldn't have done that. But you might have. You might have because it's not your skill and your creation that is on the line, and your ego that is on the line. Because God forbid you put something out that then people
It
go...
only gets a 98% positive review.
But those couple 3 bad reviews, those were, man, if I had just waited a little longer, then I could have fixed it, and that would... No, dude. So the number 2 big mistake is release the title. Don't try to make every work a magnum opus. If you try to take instead a 3-5 year view of what you want your career to look like, ideally you see each of these little titles as stepping stones toward your ultimate goal of being whatever that goal is. But you're never going to just launch, I mean, maybe 3 of you will, the Minecraft, the Vampire Survivors, and the who knows what else, the Undertale, that are just the immediate Stardew Valley, I guess. Probably none of you are going to do that. I'm sorry. But that's great, because there are another 100,000 game developers that are making games and are making money that weren't those 4, and they have a whole bunch of different great titles in their catalog, and that's no less meaningful or important. So resist the urge to make everything absolutely perfect and a magnum opus. Release more titles, because having your portfolio will make you look better to future big jobs, like AAA jobs that will want to hire you. And then lastly, what was my lastly? My lastly one. Oh, yeah. It was right. Oh, yes. And I admit that I am biased in this regard, but failing to invest in your own assets. So I see this a lot, where you're a new developer, you're making a game, and you don't believe in the game enough, and or you are so dedicated to feeling like you have to be scrappy and really lean as a startup, so that you're like, you know what, I'm going to use Midjourney for the background. You know what, I'm going to use voice whatever for the NPC voices. They don't have to be amazing. And so then let's assume that your game does explode. Well, now you've just released a game where all the art assets and the voice assets are non-copyrightable, because no artificial intelligence creations count as creations legally. None of them are able to be copyrighted. And that was ruled thanks to a picture of a monkey. A monkey took a picture of itself in 2017, or in 2011 actually, and then an 8-year legal battle after that ensued to determine whether or not the monkey owned the copyright to the photo. This is true, it's a great photo too. And then because the court ruled that it did not, that only humans can make stuff that is that is able to be copyrighted, that is our single biggest arrow in our quiver against artificial intelligence, because nothing can be copyrighted unless it's human made. Which means your whole game assets won't be copyrighted. Somebody could take them and use them in porn or something, and be like, now you can't do anything about it. But also, let's even assume that it doesn't blow up. The problem is, it might not blow up now because the game looks and sounds cheap. Everybody knows what AI art looks like. It just is not. It doesn't have that human soul. And not just art, the NPC voices. Who wants to play a game when immersion is the buzzword goal that we're all looking for? Who wants to play a game that is solely populated by soulless robots that didn't have a human voice involved in their creation?
Players are going to call you out on that.
They will, and I've seen it in recent even meetup groups where people were using, whether placeholder or permanent, AI assets, and everybody's
I'm trying to remember what was just released. It was just released this week. The game did not use, at least the developers claimed that the game did not use AI assets, but they used AI assets in the marketing material.
Well, that's happened repeatedly,
And-
and players hate it.
Microsoft did it with the ID at Xbox.
Yeah, players.
last year.
It made it immediately cheapened enriches your game.
It just makes sense that you're going to ask yourself, are you making a game for players, humans, or are you making games for robots?
Yeah, because which one of those two are going to pay you for that game?
That's right.
And the other thing is, people want to buy things that have value, and AI assets don't have value. Whereas, if you play a game like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, you've got Garrett Crocker's amazing soundtrack that is just pulling at your heartstrings. You have my inspired performance. But like, people buy that because of the human element. Nobody is going to pay money for AI assets that you didn't pay money for, right? Because if you didn't value it enough to pay money to create it, why are they going to value it enough to pay for the game? And it just starts a kind of domino effect of harming the perception of your game's integrity and excellence that you just don't want to start. And really, we're all starving artists. We're not that expensive, much less than you think. You can hire artists to commission gorgeous work for much, much less than you think, and I would encourage you to pay them more than that. But if you can't, it's still better to pay an artist a little than it is to pay Microsoft to use Midjourney to steal from them, or to steal my voice that I didn't consent for, which has happened. So, in summary, scope creep will kill your game. Not every game has to be a magnum opus. It's just better that you release them. And you should invest not only in yourself and your skill sets as a generalist, but also in the creations of creators that you're hiring to participate in your work. And so those are my game dev mistakes, and also some other shit about me.
We got a couple of questions.
Well, I was gonna say, like, so, I was just making sure, so, do you think it'd be better to release, like, a few mini games that you like to make, or just
Always.
a few larger projects?
I think, well, actually, you can do both. You can release multiple mini games that you find compelling and stuff that you enjoy playing, and then if they're all, later on you find out, well, hey, all 10 of these share a common thread. Bundle them together, or iterate off that idea and make a bigger, better version of those now that you've made 10 different things that incorporate the skills you've used to make all those. So
building off of what you said, my first game was the magnum opus that you've warned people not to talk about, right? And in hindsight, right, when we're developing some of our newer games, when we develop components of these games, right, like if we're working on a small dialogue system to help shoo the story along, right, it's like, okay, where can we recycle this component that we're developing for a future game, right? If we're developing this dialogue system, we can reuse this batch of code in a visual novel, for example, right? So you can use, kind of building off what you said, right? You can use components to make smaller games to build up to something greater too.
Not only that, you are building your portfolio and with income that comes into a business standpoint, and they're very, very successful. Sock Pop is one of those very successful type of studios where they turn around games into money. And they're building, while you're building the game, you're bringing in income because then you can work on the larger game, and then you can continue that process, and then more people get excited, and the next thing you know, you have like a franchise of some sort.
And I like money.
That's a really good thing to have.
To what you said, a friend of mine just put that into practice in a really great way. He and a couple friends put a little studio together, and they've got a big pie in the sky like game that they're working on. But in the meantime, to prove that they could just turn and burn, like release a title, they made a hysterical game, a walking simulator puzzle something, and they call it Don't Pee. It is $1.99 on Steam. It has 94% positive reviews. It takes maybe 45 minutes to play. It's amazing, and it was so good and funny and unexpected that now there's like a impromptu speedrunning community like coming around it. That he got that Don't Pee stream on Moist Critical. Like, it's ridiculous, and they sold like a few thousand copies of it because it's a silly, ridiculous game. If you had tried to make a magnum opus, you would have not made that game. And if they had not made that game while they're working on the big one, they wouldn't have made several $1,000s and have this awesome thing that opened up so many doors. So,
Yes, sir.
So it seems like there's a good chunk of the industry that also loves to work in either live service play or early access that continues development. I'm curious on your opinions of how that development cycle is different from the kind of just cut and release game on development. And if you think that entering into an industry through something like that or something as cut and run is a better way.
So when we're talking about especially studios starting up, there's no budget for QA. So putting out a game is probably the best way to get feedback on that. And if you put it out there with the clear understanding that this is not 1.0, that we're going to get there. So you let me know what you find with it, I'll fix it. And it doesn't have to be a break fix. It could be you let me know what you like and what you don't like, and I'll try to put more of what you like and less of what you don't like. And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
For early access, that Magnus Opus game that I was talking, the Magnum Opus game that I was talking about, we had like an Indiegogo Kickstarter campaign for this game, and at that point it was about halfway done, and it did not make its goal. And me and Paul had the discussions like, okay, let's release what we have. Let's make that a Steam game in itself and call that part 1. So that's what we ended up doing. Instead of early accessing the whole game and having it just sit there languishing with this early access title, we released part 1 as its own Steam title, and then we're working on like a compilation of part 1 mixed in with the full planned game that we planned.
Episodic.
Kind of. It's more like part 1 full game as opposed to episode 2 by itself.
Yes, sir.
Cool. I just wanted to build off the last 2 questions with the scope creep and what he was talking about. Do you believe that, well, I'll start with like just games that you do. Do you believe that it's more optimal to say, get the base game out, release it, and then you start thinking about all the things that you had in the back for you like have control of the scope creep, you actually got the game out, but you still don't want to like go to the next game. You feel like you can put off more on to that single game. Do you think that's more optimal to do, like as a means to handle your own scope creep?
Okay, I'll answer.
It's a great question.
Internally, there would be some things like, we're going to do it for the next game, and then with the notion that we're not going to have a next game in the series. So it's just like, okay, we're just going to release what we have, because at some point you get to a point where you just got to just like, okay, we need to stop. We had now we're a little bit better with it, that we know like it's going to be this amount of levels, it's going to have this amount of bosses, it's going to have this amount of songs, and that's it. And sometimes I would have a battle, like if I'm the producer on the game and I'm working with the director on the game, it's like, wow, there should really be a different song here. I'm like, does it really need to be a different song here, right? And you can always work on stuff post-release, but then at that point you need to watch the sales trends and see, is it worth investing into it, or is it better to finish the game and move on to the next one?
Return on investment.
Yeah, so sometimes, game release and it just bombs, right? And
I was going to
say something.
Go ahead, yeah.
I was also the 2022 Global Game Jam keynote speaker. What I talked about in these is that you can actually figure all this out in game jams. Knowing what you want to do, how you want to do it, it'll show you how you work, and you'll understand your creep. It's not like a little mirror of what you need to do, when you need to release, and it's going to cap you. You can't submit that game past them, but you probably not have the same vigor afterwards to kind of figure that out. So if you're doing or practicing more game jam before you decide to work on your game that you want to release, whether it be small within a month, you'll figure that out very quickly.
To add on to it, so he also mentioned live service games, things going to early access or whatever. Do you believe that it would be better because I've seen a lot of these games just like crash and burn because like they're ready to push, they're just rushing to push something out, but then they don't look back and look at their quality isn't quite there. So like these games will like live for a year and then die out for like one reason or another. Do you believe that they should sometimes have a little bit of patience and like try to slowly work in like their feedback and try to, you know.
Final Fantasy 14 1.0 suffered from that, right? For those who, if you've played the MMO, you know, it released in such a bad state that they dropped a giant meteor on the whole world and rebuilt it. And it caused a lot of internal changes in their game design philosophy moving forward, that they had to release games that are good from the start without this notion of, oh, we'll fix it later, or we'll fix it. Especially in Final Fantasy 14's case, which was a live service game. When Final Fantasy 14 failed the first time, version 1.0, at that time it was no like, when you release it, if you release it like this, it's a death sentence. You know, people are like, just shut the game down and it's done. But you know, Square Enix really wanted to keep that Final Fantasy brand going, so they ended up rebuilding it to what it is now. It's a hugely successful MMO. But that should never be the, oh, we can always patch it in later, we can always fix it later. That should never be the, you should always have a good solid core loop of a game, and then figure out what the players like and expand on it from there.
That's what I was thinking. I went like, that kind of statement was out where it's like, don't follow like what you've seen like some of the more recent live service play games have been doing, where like they'll release something in an awful state and then like they'll fix it later. Yes, some of those games will come out and they do end up better over time, but I believe something like that will like overall hurt your brand.
It will.
And I think it's.
So I'm going to give you a three-part answer. One, the decision on when to release a game, we can use words like should all the time. Should you release it or not? The decision will be made economically. Right before you run out of money is when you're going to release that game.
Or before holiday season.
Or before holiday season, right?
Shots is that way.
So I mean, there's that. And the way to prevent a half-baked game from coming out is by having a really concise GDD, follow through, make your core absolutely solid. That has to start well before that decision is made. But as I say, seriously, if I told you anything other than it being economic, I would be misleading you. Number two, about games that ship half-baked, those represent systemic problems. There was a problem in the development of that game. Either they lost complete track of time, or they didn't know, they didn't have the quality measures to know that it was half-baked. There's nobody that writes any kind of code that is not familiar with the term, well, it works on my machine. Okay, I mean, seriously, that there's a lack of internal mechanisms. And the third thing is that don't think that the people that released a crappy game half-baked, if they had only worked on it for 17 more years, would have been an old crappy game at the end of that time. I mean, if there are systemic problems, time will not heal all wounds. If you're doing stuff wrong, it doesn't matter how long you do it wrong, it's still wrong.
Can I chime in?
Please.
On that? So I've been on all sides of the table in those kind of situations, and you're completely right. It's definitely systemic problems, but what we also need to remember is that we have severe, as those on the outside of the company most of the time, we have severe survivorship bias. For every one of those that, you know, No Man's Sky that somehow claws it back and lives, there are 20, 50 that released half-baked or just never released because the systemic problems killed it before it could even be possibly shipped. And so I was involved in one of those called Bless Online that you may have heard of, was a Korean MMO, and it was supposed to be the WoW killer, and I was the casting director and session director for that, and a bunch of characters in that, and it was very obvious from our standpoint that it was seriously broken in development. The quality control was non-existent, not just in localization, but also in the audio. They took like really great performances from us that we gave them in high quality and then ran them through some kind of crazy, horrible filters and compression, and so all the audio sounded terrible. And unsurprisingly, players, even when it did release, they recognized it for what it was. It was a cash grab, and it died really quickly. And it was terrible. It was so terrible, actually, that I couldn't even use any of the cutscenes from the game in my portfolio, like afterwards, and I didn't even want to.
I have to say that Duke Nukem Forever took 15 years and several development teams, and still released a game that, if you want to be charitable, you can say was mediocre.
Yeah, and then, I'm also in Fallout 76, and that was one that released pretty half-baked, but they were able to claw it back because they actually listened to feedback and did turn it around and made the right kind of changes.
Also that there was from a company, they're one of my clients, but it's from a company that knows how to make games that either ran out of time or ran out of budget.
Yeah, exactly.
But where the additional effort resulted in polished, defined work. I'll also say that game that Michael and I both worked on, System Shock.
Yeah.
This game was supposed to be a one-year project with a budget of $1.35 million. And it turned out to be a 7-year project with a budget of, oh God, I don't even want to know.
You don't.
Which I was responsible for generating the money to pay for, so it was kind of personal on that note. However, the game won, pretty much every award last year. I'm looking forward to the response that it gets when it comes out.
Because they did actually, we did wait until it was actually releasable. They didn't put it out half-baked and then fix it.
The
They
thing
waited
is
until
also
it was perfect.
that we were a company that had enough alternative revenue.
Exactly.
So.
A lot of companies aren't going to do that, so.
Yeah.
Or aren't willing to make the commitment, or not willing to make the commitment. So.
I couldn't be more impressed with how Nightdive handled that ultimately, because that was a tumultuous production cycle, and despite that, and despite several teams cycling over and coming through, they managed to refocus, reorient. You helped that out tremendously, Larry, and it ended up being something I was extremely proud of.
Yes, sir.
Composing, game audio and sound design. Is that something adjacent to what you do? Is that something you also do, or is that something separate? Do you have a sound designer to create the sounds for like sword slashing and stuff, or is it completely separate from composing?
At a certain point in my career, I did do both, and then I decided to pivot and not do it anymore, and just focus solely on music composition, because that's what I went to school for. I taught myself sound design and all the other things too, but yeah, if it comes down to a small development team, if they need it at this certain point, depending on the budget, I could participate. Obviously, if they need it and they can't afford it someone else, I'm still capable of doing it. And sound design is just really small music cues in my mind, and it just needs proper practice. But I did it for about 9 years before I decided to focus directly on interactive, dynamic, and adaptive music. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
What a great group we have. Just
Can I just, before any more of you leave, can I just get a picture of all of you so I remember that I was here?
You're not the only one.
Yeah, thanks for being here, y'all. Are you
Share it with me later.
Everybody give us a wave. Yeah. Y'all rock. Thank you for being so interactive and passionate.
We got some questions. Yes, sir.
In software development, one of the things I struggle with a lot is long-running projects that span multiple years.
Yes.
And you start running into a lot of things like tech debt and poor design decisions made in the beginning. The obvious solution is to just plan ahead for a lot of those things, but that's easier said than done. So I wanted to try and get some of your thoughts or...
Tim doesn't call me up and tell me when the new version of Unreal's coming. Our friendship has been fractured, so. There are real problems. There are real problems with that, and nobody really knows how long it's going to take. Seriously, what I just told you, what I just said loosely, it was really painful, and there were parts that the game might not have ever come out if things had not broken otherwise. So that really does occur. And yes, Unreal changed versions multiple times. We still released it in Unreal 4.x rather than 5 because it would have required a massive redo for us. So those are real issues, and they're hard to plan out. The thing that you need to take into account is that when you're writing up your plans, you're writing that you're in the desert, that the sand underneath your feet is constantly moving. And you need to be aware of that. The only thing that I can tell you on that, second time is easier.
I'll give you like a game design development related answer. One, it depends on the genre of the game, right? What I would say, like if you're trying to structure like the game design and plan out your game, I would plan out the beginning and the end. You want to have a strong beginning, you want to have a strong end, because you want to capture the player's interest, and you want to make sure that the player, when they see those credits roll, they feel like, damn, that was a really good game, right? And then the middle still needs to be strong, but strong beginning, strong ending. That's from a game design perspective. From a game engine development perspective, you want to use something, are you using an LTS? Do you know what that means or stands for? Yeah, so long-term support. So when you're using a game engine like Unity or Game Maker or whatever, always go for the nearest long-term support version, because that's the one that's going to be supported by a lot of different avenues, right? And those features are likely to be supported for a long time, as opposed to like dealing with an engine that might update frequently. So yeah, long-term support, and then plan the beginning and the end of your game. Make sure those parts of the game are very strong.
Gentleman in the back, yes sir, with a 2K hat.
Oh, okay. So I'm currently working in the industry in QA.
For 2K?
I was wondering, so I want to get to like 3D modeling and stuff like that. I've been working on a portfolio, but I want to know if, like, pretty much, is it perceived like as having QA experience as like beneficial or like added upon to like my portfolio, or like would you like?
The answer is going to be it depends, but a serious studio is going to take QA very seriously. If they're not a serious studio, then there are probably other things. If anyone tells you, if anyone disparages QA, there are probably other things that you're going to find wrong about.
I worked in software QA, not in the games industry, but just regular software automation QA for 10 years. And in that part of QA is treated a little bit better than QA in the game industry, but it's still important that any experience that you have to know how the software environment works, right? The software process, right? That can all be applicable to when you apply for other jobs in the industry, because you already kind of know how things work, how meetings are held, and how things kind of come together. So yeah, I wouldn't discount that experience at all.
But seriously, what you said about building your portfolio is the first place. If you start off with a portfolio and then you add on your additional experience, you're building on a foundation. If you don't have that portfolio, that's where you start kind of running into questions.
Yeah, onto that. So for context, I'm Bethea and software. I'm kind of one of the more talented and stuff, but it's kind of hard to find additional mental energy or time to add on to trying to get on a daily job as well. Recommended recommendations for that, so trying out the shit.
You're gonna love me for this. Yeah, join the IGDA, because that means that you have a place that you're gonna want to go to every month. That's gonna, if it works out well for you, it's gonna help give you some additional energy. You're gonna come out of that having seen what somebody else did and be enthused about that.
Are you in the Silicon Valley area then?
I work remote.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, Utah. I think there's an IGDA chapter in Salt Lake City.
There is one in Salt Lake City that I know of. The other ones that you want to look at or see if there are any universities.
Yeah.
That's always a good place to look for. But go online and hit the IGDA.com and you should find it.
Everything's more fun when you're pursuing it with friends that you look forward to seeing.
Absolutely. The last point that we should probably make about the industry and about Survival Guide is so Michael did the voice for System Shock. You did the response.
Yeah, casting and for the session direction. I was viewing the characters too.
So I didn't know that when I met him.
You didn't?
No, I didn't
What?
know that. I didn't know that when we first met. I really didn't. But you're going to find out that everybody in the industry knows everybody. And it really is important on who you know. But the other thing is that, look, game development, and particularly remote development, software development in general, but game development specifically, tends to be done remote, it tends to be lonely, it tends to be, you know, it depletes your energy because it's just you working on this stuff. And the IGDA, those kind of organizations, if not the IGA, GameJam.com, all of those places will help give you more internal energy, more motivation. I gotta finish this thing because I'll be seeing the guys, the fellas next week, and I don't want to disappoint them. It really does work. Were there any other questions? Sir with the back. No intimidation going on here. Go ahead.
Do you have any tips for like marketing on a tight budget, like to get the most bang for your buck? Like,
Yeah, I do.
Google hits?
I do, but you probably want to spend a couple hours with me on that one. First thing I'm going to tell you, the most valuable tool on there, it's going to surprise you, social media. Do the same thing that we've talked about that Michael, huge props to Michael for this. Do the same thing we just talked about on the game journalists. Start off with, hey, I just read this article that you printed, that you wrote. I just read this article and I thought that this point that you made was really good. You do that on a consistent basis, and pretty soon they know you. Think it doesn't matter? Take a look at Shack News, at Nightdive Studios does it for Shack News when we won our awards last year on December 31st. One of the things that they talked about with me, that the lead editor-in-chief of Shack News said about me, is that he feels like I've read his articles before he has. And I comment on them. And I don't comment on every one of them, but every once in a while I find something that's gold. I call that out. And that certainly makes, when we meet at GDC, it certainly makes those interactions a lot easier. It's the cheapest form of marketing. Be out there on social media. Make sure that your persona on social media is such that people want to follow you. I want to see a guy that does zero marketing budget and has an enormous audience reach. Dave Oshry from New Blood. My hat's off to him. I mean, I worked with him on a project, but I'm going to tell you, young guy's better than me. One of the things that he does on a consistent basis is he puts up articles, props to people who've done games that he likes. I don't know how he gets all the time to play these games, but he does that. And what he does is he builds up a network because he supported these people, they support him.
You were about to say something.
Yeah, I was supposed to say, someone has to always put themselves out there. You guys don't overthink what you're trying to put out. You're working on a game project and you've got these ideas. As soon as you get the idea, just put it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to do it. Because the time you're wasting thinking about how you're going to make it look and do whatever you think, you're wasting your time. Other people are doing it faster than you. And it's the truth, but you just gotta keep doing it and pushing it out. With limitations, of course, like don't overextend yourself. But I'm talking about, I speak about this in the book I'm writing, you gotta tap into the childlike inner person in you. We're all adults, we have our responsibilities. But if you listen to the inner child, that was like to play with your toys and mommy, look at this, daddy, look at that. That's the same type of thing you're gonna be showcasing. It's the show and tell of that you really could put out there and just do it. Don't think about it. Nike it, just do it.
I want to say one thing because we're on sort of the marketing topic right now, and the easiest marketing, like Larry said, is social media. And because we don't have slideshows, we need all of you to follow all of us on social media so we can know what you're working on, and you can ask us further questions. We can give you free advice because we all love to hear ourselves talk. So my Twitter is at WhatHeSaidVO. What He Said VO. Michael Schwalbe is my name. Instagram, actor Michael SCHWALBE. Chase, give us your socials, please.
I like this marketing plug that's going on. It's Chase Bethea, Chase like the bank, B as in boy, E as in Eric, T as in Tom, H as in Harry, A as in Eric, A as in Apple. That is across the board.
Grover said his earlier because he's smarter than us, but Grover, say it again.
At Grover Whim, Grover like the Sesame Street character, WHIM. And then the studio is at Wimberly, WHIMINDIE.
Larry, where can they follow you?
Larry Nightdive.
And here's the thing, remember me bitching at all of you about follow-ups? You should all follow up with all of us, because then we'll remember that we saw you and talked to you, and then you'll know a guy.
Oh, there you go. Like that.
You like that segue?
Yeah.
All right, so this guy in the blue back here has been valiantly trying to get his hand called for like an hour, so I'm gonna do it.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. So you were talking about us not having to wear all the hats, just to kind of have a general knowledge of the aspects that are going to our games. My question is, what should we have the greatest knowledge on as far as like business, the art, music, programming, all that stuff? What should we know, I guess, more than others? Like, what should we have a greater knowledge of out of those aspects, and then kind of go down the line of what we should prioritize first, and then what should be the thing that we don't really have to know too much about, but should know a little bit at least, so we kind of have a direction and we know what people should be doing in our team.
So the best answer for this is it depends. So, right, it depends on like what kind of genre of game you want to make, right? If you want to make a visual novel game, for example, right, the most important things are the writing, the art, right, those are the two most important things, because if you have poor writing, the players aren't going to stick around till the end. If you have poor art, players aren't going to be captured by the visuals, right? And those are the two most important components, right? But if you're developing something like a twin stick shooter, you want to have like these explosive visuals going off, right? You want to have the really good art, really good music, really good boss battle designs, really good levels. And so, do you know like what type of game that you're
But you're answering the question within development only.
Yeah.
I think this question was a little bit broader than that.
Okay.
And I'm gonna throw out two things on there. First of all, the easiest way to do that, this is an old sales thing, but this really works. Draw a T thing, draw a T, and put all the things that you're thinking about on there. Business side, economics, all of those things on there. And think about, if I get this right, what do I get? And if I get it wrong, what happens? So let me give you an example. At some point, you're going to have to sign contracts. Well, if you get it right, great. But if you get that contract wrong, really bad things can happen.
Yeah.
So, and you don't have to talk about game development. You can talk about how Billy Joel didn't make songs for like 6 years because he signed a contract that he hated, that gave him all the rights to the songs that he did in that period to somebody that he didn't like.
Grand Theft Auto remasters, it's missing half the music because of loopholes in the contracts that they couldn't use it.
So again, I mean, think about things that way. Risk reward, okay, a risk reward model on there. So you want to have some knowledge of contracts. It's important to have that, to focus on those things. On the other hand, maybe the game that you're working on has a heavy music base. Maybe you're doing something where the music is really, really important. Okay? You need to focus on that. But think about it in terms of your own context. What happens if you get it right, and what happens if you get it wrong? You probably aren't going to do your own taxes if you're running the business on it, right? You're probably going to hire someone. So you can kind of put that down there, find the right accountant, and then I'm done with it, right? You don't need to focus on tax law. You don't need to become an expert on it. You're going to have a guy for that, right? I mean, think about things that way. The other part is look at your team and figure out where your team has holes in it. If you're if you're running the company, part of your responsibility is to fill those holes. So there are things that's going to change the dynamic of what you need to know. Guys, I want to thank you all very much. It's coming in close to 5 o'clock. Thank you. Really exciting to see this community here in Vegas. People coming into Vegas to learn about games. It's really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
content